The restaurant's kitchen was finally quiet. After another long Friday night shift, James wiped down the last table in the dining room and let out a tired breath. His feet ached, his back was sore. But that was just part of the job. He'd been working at the Golden Plate for 3 years now, and he knew the routine by heart. At 28 years old, James had learned to take pride in the small things, the way he could balance 4 plates without breaking a sweat, how he remembered regular customers' favorite drinks, the smile he managed to keep on his face even when entitled diners treated him like he was invisible. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it paid his bills. Most months, anyway. The Golden Plate sat in the heart of the city's upscale district, where businessmen closed deals over $100 steaks and socialites sipped wine that cost more than James made in a week. He didn't mind serving them. Everyone deserved good service, regardless of how much money they spent. That's what his mother had taught him growing up. Treat people right, and the rest will follow. It was almost 11 o'clock when James finally locked the front door and headed toward the back exit. November had brought an early cold snap, and he pulled his thin jacket tighter as he stepped into the alley. That's when he saw him. An old man sat hunched against the brick wall near the dumpster, his body trembling from the cold. His clothes were layers of worn-out fabrics, none of them thick enough for the weather. His hands, wrinkled and dirty, clutched a torn blanket around his shoulders. But it was his eyes that caught James's attention. They looked empty, like someone who had given up hoping for better days. James had seen him before. The old man sometimes wandered through this part of town, and James had passed him a few times on his way to work. But tonight was different. Tonight, the temperature had dropped below freezing, and the man looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Without thinking twice, James turned around and went back into the restaurant. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from urgency. He moved quickly through the kitchen, grabbing a paper bag from the supply closet. The dinner service had ended hours ago, but there was still food in the warming station. Fresh bread rolls, still soft and warm, a generous portion of roasted chicken with herbs, some roasted vegetables that would have just been thrown away in the morning. James packed everything carefully, adding a bottle of water and some butter packets. His hands worked fast. He knew the security cameras were everywhere in the restaurant, but right now he didn't care. A man was freezing and starving outside, and James had the means to help him. It was that simple. He slipped back out through the rear door. The old man hadn't moved. James approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Excuse me, sir," James said gently. The man's head lifted. Up close, James could see he was probably in his 60s, maybe 70s. His face was weathered and marked by years of hardship. But there was something dignified about him, even in his current state. "I brought you some food," James continued, holding out the bag. "It's still warm, and there's water too." For a moment, the old man just stared at the bag like he couldn't believe it was real. Then his hands reached out, shaking as they took it. When he looked up at James, his eyes were suddenly wet with tears. "God bless you, son," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "God bless you." "What's your name?" James asked, crouching down to his level. "Leonard," the old man replied. "Leonard Davis." "I'm James. Listen, Leonard, it's too cold to be out here tonight. There's a shelter about 6 blocks west. Do you know the one?" Leonard nodded slowly. "I know it, but they're usually full by now." James pulled out his wallet and handed Leonard a $20 bill. It was money he couldn't really spare, but something in his gut told him to do it anyway. "Just in case you need anything else," James said. "Stay warm, okay?" Leonard clutched the money like it was a fortune. "Thank you. Thank you so much." James patted the old man's shoulder and stood up. As he walked away, he heard Leonard opening the bag, and the sound of relief in his voice brought a small smile to James's face. It wasn't much, but maybe it would help Leonard get through the night. What James didn't know was that someone had been watching everything. The weekend passed normally. James spent Saturday helping his younger sister study for her college exams. She was working so hard, trying to make something of herself, and he was proud of her. On Sunday, he caught up on laundry and tried to ignore the stack of bills on his kitchen counter. Money was always tight, but he managed. Monday morning arrived too quickly. James showed up for his shift at 10 o'clock, ready for another week. But as soon as he walked through the kitchen door, the head chef gave him an odd look. "Mr. Peterson wants to see you in the office," the chef said quietly. "Right now." James's stomach dropped. Richard Peterson was the general manager, and being called to his office was never good news. James tried to think of what he might have done wrong. Had he messed up an order? Forgotten to show up for a shift? He knocked on the office door, and a stern voice told him to come in. Mr. Peterson sat behind his desk, his face cold and expressionless. Standing next to him was Derek, the assistant manager who had never liked James. Derek had that look on his face, the one that said he was enjoying whatever was about to happen. "James, sit down," Mr. Peterson said. James sat, his heart racing now. "I'm going to get straight to the point," the manager continued. "We have video footage of you stealing food from the restaurant on Friday night. That's theft of company property. It's a violation of policy, and it's grounds for immediate termination." The words hit James like a punch to the chest. "Stealing?" "Mr. Peterson, I can explain. There was a homeless man outside. He was freezing and hungry. I just gave him some food that would have been thrown away anyway." "That's not your decision to make," Derek cut in, his voice sharp. "Restaurant property is restaurant property. You don't get to just take it." "I wasn't taking it for myself," James protested. "A man needed help. He could have died out there in that cold." Mr. Peterson held up his hand. "Your reasons don't matter, James. Rules are rules. We run a business here, not a charity. If we let employees take food whenever they feel like it, where does it end? But, sir, it was just some bread and leftover chicken." "Enough," Mr. Peterson said firmly. "The decision is made. You're terminated, effective immediately. We'll mail your final paycheck." James felt like the floor was falling out from under him. 3 years of loyal service, of showing up on time, of working extra shifts when they needed him. And this was how it ended, because he fed a starving man. "This isn't right," James said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I helped someone who needed it. That shouldn't be a crime." "Then you should have done it with your own food, on your own time," Derek said smugly. "Now you need to leave. Immediately." James stood up slowly. His mind was spinning, trying to process what had just happened. He looked at Mr. Peterson one last time, hoping to see some trace of understanding or compassion, but the manager's face remained cold and unmoved. As James walked out of the office, through the kitchen, and out the back door for the last time, he felt anger, hurt, and disbelief all at once. But somewhere underneath all of that, he didn't feel regret. He had done the right thing. Even if it cost him everything, he had done the right thing. He just had no idea that this moment, this terrible moment, was actually the beginning of something he never could have imagined. The first week without a job felt like a bad dream James kept hoping he'd wake up from. He'd go to bed each night thinking maybe tomorrow things would make sense again. But every morning, reality hit him fresh. He was unemployed, and his savings account was dangerously low. James spent those early days sending out applications to every restaurant within a 15-mile radius. Fine dining, casual spots, even fast food chains. He wasn't picky anymore. He just needed work. His resume was solid. 3 years of experience at an upscale establishment, excellent customer service skills, references available upon request. That last part turned out to be the problem. By the second week, James had gotten a few callbacks. They sounded interested on the phone. His experience at the Golden Plate impressed them. But then they'd say those dreaded words. We just need to contact your previous employer for a reference. We'll get back to you soon. They never called back. James knew what was happening. Mr. Peterson or Derek was telling them something that made sure he'd never work in a decent restaurant again. Maybe they said he was a thief. Maybe they just said he wasn't eligible for rehire. Either way, the message was clear. He was being blacklisted. The rejection hurt worse than the firing. At least the firing had been quick, like ripping off a bandage. But these slow rejections, one after another, felt like dying by 1,000 cuts. Each unanswered application was another reminder that one act of kindness had somehow turned him into an unemployable person. Rent was due in 10 days. James stared at his bank account on his phone screen, watching the numbers that seemed to get smaller every time he looked. He had enough for this month's rent, barely, but after that, he'd be in serious trouble. His sister called him on Tuesday evening. Keisha was in her second year at community college, studying to become a nurse. James had been helping her with tuition and books whenever he could. She was smart, ambitious, and deserved every opportunity. "Hey, big brother," she said cheerfully when he answered. "Just wanted to remind you that my anatomy textbook payment is due next week. The used one we found is $200. Is that still okay?" James's heart sank. $200 might as well have been $2,000 right now. "Keisha," he said slowly, "I need to tell you something." He explained everything. The homeless man, the food, the firing. His voice cracked a little when he got to the part about being blacklisted. Keisha listened quietly, and when he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "James, I'm so sorry," she finally said. "This is so unfair. I know, and I'm sorry, but I can't help with the textbook right now. I don't even know if I can pay my own rent next month. Don't worry about me," Keisha said firmly. "I'll pick up extra shifts at the store. I'll figure it out. You just take care of yourself, okay? And James, what you did was right. Don't ever doubt that." After they hung up, James sat in his dark apartment and let himself feel the full weight of his situation. His sister, who worked so hard for her education, now had to work even harder because he'd fed a hungry man. It didn't seem fair. None of this seemed fair. But giving up wasn't in James's nature. If restaurants wouldn't hire him, he'd find something else. Anything else. He took a job washing dishes at a small diner on the edge of town. The owner was an older woman who didn't bother calling references. She paid cash under the table, which wasn't ideal, but it was something. The work was hot, greasy, and exhausting. His hands stayed wrinkled from the constant water. But it brought in a little money. He also started doing overnight shifts at a grocery store, stocking shelves when the store was closed. That meant working until 3 in the morning, going home for a few hours of sleep, then waking up for the lunch shift at the diner. His body ached constantly. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. But he kept going because what other choice did he have? The hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion. It was the feeling of invisible walls closing in around him. This wasn't supposed to be his life. He'd been moving forward, building something. Now he felt like he was just surviving, and barely. 3 weeks after losing his job, James was sitting on a bench in the city park during a rare afternoon off. The sun was out, but he barely noticed. He was too busy calculating in his head whether he could afford both groceries and his phone bill this month. The answer wasn't encouraging. "Young man, is that you?" James looked up. It took him a moment to recognize the person standing in front of him. The man was cleaner now, wearing clothes that actually fit. His face was shaved, his hair trimmed. But those eyes, those were the same grateful eyes from that cold November night. "Leonard," James said, standing up. The old man's face broke into a wide smile. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "Of course I remember you. You look good, man." "Really good." Leonard gestured to the bench. "Mind if I sit?" They sat together, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Leonard turned to James with a serious expression. I never got to properly thank you for what you did that night. You saved my life. I mean that literally. The temperature dropped to 18 degrees. If you hadn't given me that food, that $20, I don't think I would have made it. James shook his head. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same. No, Leonard said firmly. They wouldn't have. I've been on these streets for 5 years, and most people look right through me like I'm invisible. You saw me as a human being. You risked something to help me. That matters. Yeah, well, I lost my job over it, James said, the bitterness creeping into his voice before he could stop it. Got fired that Monday morning. Been struggling ever since. Leonard's expression shifted to shock, then anger, then something that looked like determination. They fired you? For helping me? James explained the whole situation. The cameras, the theft accusation, the blacklist. As he talked, he realized this was the first time he'd told the complete story to someone who wasn't family. It felt good to get it out, to have someone hear it who understood what that night had actually been about. When James finished, Leonard sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said something unexpected. I wasn't always homeless, you know. I had a life before all this. A career, a home. People who respected me. James listened as Leonard told his story. He'd been a regional director for a nonprofit organization that helped communities in need. He had a good salary, a nice house, a wife he loved more than anything. Then his wife got cancer. The treatments were expensive. Even with insurance, the bills piled up. He spent everything trying to save her, including his retirement savings. When she died anyway, he fell apart. Depression took over. He lost his job. Then, he lost his house. Before he knew it, he was on the streets, too broken to climb back up. I lost everything, Leonard said quietly. But I never lost my connections. Some of the people I worked with, they still remember me. They remember who I was before I fell. He turned to look directly at James. I want to help you, the way you helped me. I know someone who owns restaurants, good restaurants, places that care about more than just profit. His name is Robert, and he's a good man. If I call him, tell him about you. About what you did and why, he'll listen. I know he will. James wanted to feel hopeful, but he'd been disappointed too many times lately. Leonard, I appreciate that. I really do. But I don't want you to feel obligated. This isn't obligation, Leonard said, standing up. This is gratitude. And more than that, it's making sure a good person doesn't get destroyed by the system for doing the right thing. He pulled out a cell phone, which surprised James. He didn't know Leonard had one. I need to make some calls, Leonard said. But James, I want you to trust me on this. Sometimes when you help someone, the universe has a way of helping you back, just not always in the way you expect. As Leonard walked away, already dialing a number, James sat back on the bench. He didn't know if anything would come from this. He'd learned not to count on miracles, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. He felt hope. And sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, hope is the most powerful thing you can have. It's the difference between giving up and hanging on for one more day. James decided he'd hang on. He'd see where this led. After all, he'd already lost so much. What was a little more hope to risk? 2 days after his conversation with Leonard in the park, James's phone rang while he was scrubbing pots at the diner. He almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Probably a scam call. But something made him dry his hands and pick up anyway. Is this James? A warm voice asked. Yes, this is James. My name is Robert Chen. I'm a friend of Leonard Davis. He told me about what happened to you. And I'd like to meet with you if you're available. I own a restaurant called Community Table, and I'm looking for experienced servers." James's heart started pounding. He stepped away from the sink, moving toward the back door for some privacy. "Leonard told you about me?" "He did," Robert said. "And I have to say, what you did took real character. The kind of character I value in my employees. Would you be free tomorrow afternoon? Say around 2 o'clock? James almost laughed. Free? He was working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, running himself into the ground, but he'd make himself free. "Yes, sir, I can be there." Robert gave him the address and hung up. James stood there holding his phone, hardly believing what just happened. Maybe Leonard really had come through. Maybe this was the break he desperately needed. The next afternoon, James stood outside community table, checking his reflection in the window. He'd worn his best outfit, a button-down shirt and slacks he'd ironed 3 times to make sure they looked perfect. The restaurant was in a nicer part of town, but not the stuffy, pretentious area where the Golden Plate had been. This neighborhood felt more alive, more real. He walked inside and was immediately struck by how different it felt. The Golden Plate had been all about luxury and exclusivity. This place felt welcoming. The walls were decorated with local artwork. The tables were filled with all kinds of people, families with kids, elderly couples, young professionals, everyone mixing together naturally. "You must be James." He turned to see an Asian man in his 50s approaching with an extended hand. Robert Chen had kind eyes and a genuine smile that put James at ease immediately. "Yes, sir. Thank you for meeting with me. Please, call me Robert. Come on back to my office." They walked through the restaurant, and James noticed the staff greeting customers warmly. One server was helping an elderly woman choose from the menu with real patience, not the fake kind he'd seen so many waiters use. Another was laughing with a table of construction workers like they were old friends. Robert's office was small but organized. They sat down, and Robert pulled out a simple application form. "Leonard spoke very highly of you," Robert began. "He said you lost your job because you fed him when he was starving. Is that accurate?" James nodded, feeling that familiar mixture of pride and pain. "Yes, sir. They called it theft. I called it being human." Robert leaned back in his chair. "Tell me what happened. The whole story." So James told him everything. The cold night, Leonard shivering by the dumpster, the decision that took no time at all because it wasn't really a decision. You see someone suffering and you have the power to help, you just do it. He talked about the firing, the blacklist, the struggle since then. Robert listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When James finished, there was a moment of silence. "I'm going to be honest with you, James. What happened to you is exactly what's wrong with this industry. Too many restaurants treat their employees like robots and their food like it's more valuable than human life. That's not how I run my business." He stood up and walked to a framed mission statement on the wall. Community Table exists to do 2 things: serve quality food and serve our community. We have a program where leftover food goes to local shelters. We partner with organizations that help homeless individuals. And we treat everyone who walks through our doors with dignity, whether they're paying customers or not. James felt something stirring in his chest. Hope, real hope, not just the fragile kind that breaks easily. "I've been in this business for 25 years, Robert continued. "I've hired hundreds of people, and you know what I've learned? Skills can be taught, technical ability can be trained, but character, that's something you either have or you don't. And James, what you did that night showed me you have character." "Does that mean—" James started, hardly daring to finish the sentence. "It means I'd like to offer you a position as a server here. The pay is $12 an hour plus tips, which usually average another $15 to $20 an hour. We provide health insurance after 90 days, 2 weeks paid vacation per year. And most importantly, you'll work with people who understand that this job is about more than just taking orders." James had to blink back tears. $12 an hour base pay was more than he'd made at the Golden Plate. Health insurance meant he could finally go to the dentist for that tooth that had been bothering him. Vacation time was something he'd never had before. "I don't know what to say," James managed. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Robert said with a smile. "Wait until you've worked a Friday night dinner rush. Then we'll see if you still want to thank me." They both laughed, and Robert extended his hand again. This time it wasn't just a greeting, it was a promise, a fresh start. James started the following Monday. The training was thorough but friendly. The other servers welcomed him like family, showing him the computer system, introducing him to regular customers, sharing their tips and tricks. Nobody looked down on him. Nobody treated him like he was just there to serve. There was Rita, a single mother in her 40s who'd been with Community Table for 6 years. She showed James how Robert always made sure single parents could have flexible schedules for their kids. There was David, a college student working his way through school, who explained how Robert had helped him apply for scholarships. There was Lynn, an older woman who'd been in the industry for 30 years, who told James that Robert was the best boss she'd ever had. "He actually cares," Lynn said simply. "Not just about the business, but about us, about the community. That's rare." Within a week, James understood what she meant. A customer came in one evening, a woman who looked exhausted and worried. She ordered the cheapest item on the menu and water. James noticed her checking her phone anxiously, saw how thin she looked. When he brought her food, he quietly added some extra sides. "I didn't order these," she said. "Consider it a gesture from the house," James said softly. "We hope your day gets better." Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered thank you. Later, when James was cashing out his tables, Robert pulled him aside. "I saw what you did for that woman," Robert said. James felt a flash of panic. Was he about to be fired again? For the same thing? But Robert was smiling. "That's exactly the kind of service I want to see here. You saw someone struggling and you helped. Well done." The relief James felt was overwhelming. This was a place where kindness wasn't punished. It was encouraged. It was the whole point. After his first month, James was able to catch up on his bills. After 2 months, he helped Keisha with her textbook money. After 3 months, he had more in his savings account than he'd had in years. But more than the money, he had something else. He had dignity again. Purpose, a place where his values aligned with his work. One afternoon, Leonard came into the restaurant. James was serving a table when he saw him walk in, and he couldn't help but grin. Leonard looked even better than he had in the park. He was wearing clean clothes, his face had filled out a little, and he carried himself with confidence. James finished with his table and went straight to Leonard, pulling him into a hug. "Look at you," Leonard said, beaming. "This place suits you." "I owe you everything," James said. "No," Leonard corrected him gently. "You owe me nothing. I'm just paying forward what you gave me. That's how it's supposed to work. Kindness creates more kindness." They sat down together, and Leonard shared his news. He'd gotten into a transitional housing program. He was volunteering at a homeless shelter 3 days a week, helping others navigate the systems he'd learned to navigate. He was even talking to his old nonprofit organization about possibly coming back in some capacity. "You gave me more than food that night," Leonard said. "You gave me back my humanity. You reminded me that I mattered, that I wasn't invisible. That changed everything for me." James shook his head in wonder. One moment, one simple act of kindness, had created ripples he never could have imagined. He'd fed a hungry man and lost everything. But somehow, losing everything had led him here, to a better job, a better life, and the knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it costs you, is always worth it. He just had no idea that his story was far from over. 6 months into working at Community Table, James received an unexpected text from Robert asking him to come in early for a meeting. His stomach did that familiar nervous flip. Even though Robert had been nothing but supportive, old habits died hard. The last time a boss called him into the office, it hadn't ended well. But when James arrived and saw Robert's expression, he knew this was different. Robert looked excited, the kind of excited that makes you want to lean forward and listen carefully. "James, sit down. I want to talk to you about something." James sat across from Robert's desk, trying to read the situation. "You've been with us for 6 months now," Robert began, "and I've been watching you closely. The way you handle customers, how you train new staff, the care you put into every interaction. You're not just doing a job. You understand what we're trying to build here." "I love working here," James said honestly. "It's the first place I've ever worked that feels like it matters." Robert nodded. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I have a proposition for you. I'm promoting you to shift supervisor. It comes with a raise, more responsibility, and the opportunity to help shape how we operate." James felt his breath catch. Supervisor. 6 months ago, he'd been washing dishes for cash under the table, wondering if he'd ever work in a real restaurant again. Now this. "I don't know what to say. Are you sure?" "I'm completely sure," Robert said firmly. "You have leadership qualities, James. People respect you, they listen to you, and most importantly, you lead by example. That's rare." James accepted, his mind already racing with ideas and the weight of the responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. He'd be responsible for scheduling, training, handling conflicts, making sure the whole operation ran smoothly during his shifts. The first few weeks as supervisor were challenging. Some of the staff who'd been there longer than him had to adjust to taking direction from him. There was one server, Thomas, who made it clear he wasn't happy about the promotion. He'd been at Community Table for 2 years and probably expected to be promoted himself. James didn't let it discourage him. He pulled Thomas aside one evening after the shift. "Look, I know this might feel unfair to you," James said. "You've been here longer. You know this place inside and out. I respect that." Thomas crossed his arms, defensive. "So why'd he pick you?" "I don't know," James admitted. "But I'm not here to boss people around or prove I'm better than anyone. I'm here to help us all succeed. You've got knowledge I don't have. I'd like to learn from you, and maybe you can learn something from me, too." Something in Thomas's expression softened. "You really mean that?" "I do. We're a team. That's the whole point of this place, right?" After that conversation, Thomas became one of James's strongest allies. He taught James the ins and outs of inventory management, showed him tricks for handling difficult customers, and backed him up when other staff had questions. It was a reminder that respect had to be earned, not demanded. As supervisor, James started implementing small changes that made a big difference. He noticed that newer staff members often felt overwhelmed during rush hours, so he created a buddy system where experienced servers mentored them through their first few weeks. He reorganized the prep work schedule so it was more efficient. He started a notebook where staff could write down suggestions for improvement, and he actually read them and implemented the good ideas. But what James cared about most was continuing the mission that made Community Table special. He made sure every staff member understood that they weren't just serving food. They were serving people, and every person deserved dignity. One evening, a young man came in wearing a wrinkled suit that had seen better days. He sat at a corner table and studied the menu for a long time. James watched him add up prices, saw his shoulders slump. When Rita went to take his order, the young man asked for just a side salad and water. James walked over after Rita put in the order. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but notice you're dressed like you've got something important going on. Job interview?" The young man looked surprised, but nodded. "Yeah, had 3 interviews today, actually. Still waiting to hear back from any of them." "That's tough. James said. Tell you what, we had a mistake order in the kitchen, a full chicken dinner that'll just go to waste if nobody eats it. Would you be willing to help us out with that? The young man's eyes widened. I can't pay for that. No charge. It's either you eat it or it goes in the trash. What do you say? For a moment, the young man looked like he might cry. Then he smiled. Thank you. Thank you so much. James brought him the full meal, and later, when Robert asked about the mistake order, James explained what happened. Robert just smiled and said, "That's coming out of your paycheck." Then he laughed and added, "I'm kidding. That's exactly what I'd have done." 3 months into his role as supervisor, Robert called another meeting. This time, James wasn't nervous at all. He was curious. "James, I want to talk to you about something bigger," Robert said. "I've been thinking a lot about expansion, not just opening more restaurants, though that's part of it. I want to start a training program." "What kind of training program?" Robert leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. "A program that takes people who've had a hard time, people who've been overlooked or rejected by other places, and trains them for careers in hospitality. People from rough backgrounds, people coming out of difficult situations, people who just need someone to give them a real chance." James felt his heart start beating faster. He knew exactly what kind of people Robert was talking about. He'd been one of them. "The program would teach everything," Robert continued. "Cooking, serving, management, customer service. But more than that, it would teach them that they have value, that they can build careers they're proud of. And I want you to help me run it." "Me?" "Robert, I'm not a teacher." "Yes, you are. You've been teaching our staff since the day you got here. You teach by example. You teach by caring. And your story, what you went through, that gives you credibility. You know what it's like to be rejected by the system. You know what it takes to climb back up." James sat back, overwhelmed. This was bigger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just about him having a good job. This was about creating opportunities for others the way Leonard and Robert had created opportunity for him. "When would this start?" James asked. "I'm thinking 6 months. That gives us time to secure funding, find a location, develop curriculum. But I need to know you're in. I can't do this without you." James thought about Leonard, shivering in that alley. He thought about his own desperate weeks after being fired. He thought about all the people out there right now who had potential and character but couldn't catch a break because one mistake or one piece of bad luck had closed all the doors. "I'm in," James said. "Absolutely, I'm in." Over the next few months, James worked his regular shifts while helping Robert plan the program. They reached out to community organizations, talked to social services, connected with halfway houses and shelters. They designed a curriculum that was practical but also empowering. They decided to call it Second Chances because that's exactly what it was. Leonard became involved too. He agreed to be a mentor and speaker, sharing his story with participants. His journey from homelessness to stability would show people that change was possible, that rock bottom wasn't the end. One afternoon, James's sister Keisha came to visit him at the restaurant. She was finishing up her nursing degree and had done well, despite the financial struggles. She sat at the bar while James took a break, and he told her about the program. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her eyes shining. "You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something beautiful." "I had help," James said. "Leonard, Robert, you, everyone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." "But you're the one who did it," Keisha insisted. "You could have become bitter. You could have given up. Instead, you're creating opportunities for other people." As James looked around community table that day, watching his staff work together like a well-oiled machine, seeing customers from all walks of life enjoying their meals, he realized something profound. Getting fired from the Golden Plate had felt like the end of his world, but it had actually been the beginning of his purpose. He'd lost a job, but found his calling. And the best part? The story was still unfolding. Second Chances would launch soon, and James had no idea how many lives it would change. But he was about to find out, and the impact would be bigger than he ever dreamed possible. 2 years after being fired from the Golden Plate, James stood in front of 30 people who'd gathered for the opening ceremony of Second Chances. The training facility wasn't fancy, just a renovated community center with a commercial kitchen, dining area, and classroom space. But to James, it was perfect. He looked out at the faces in the crowd. Robert stood in the front row, beaming with pride. Leonard sat beside him, wearing a suit and looking every bit like the professional he used to be. Keisha had taken time off from her nursing job to be there. Rita, David, Lynn, and Thomas from Community Table had all shown up to support him. Even some of the program's first students were there, nervous but hopeful. 3 years ago, James began, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. I was working at a restaurant when I saw a man who needed help. I gave him food and I lost my job because of it. At the time, it felt like my life was over. He paused, looking directly at Leonard. But that moment led me here, to this program, to all of you. And I realized something important. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually pushing us toward our real purpose. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. Robert gave a speech about second chances and community responsibility. Leonard shared his story, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room when he finished. Then James introduced the first class of 12 students who would spend the next 3 months learning everything they needed to build careers in the hospitality industry. The students came from everywhere. There was Angela, a single mother who'd been unemployed for a year after her previous employer shut down. Miguel, who'd made mistakes as a teenager and now had a record that made finding work nearly impossible. There was Diane, a veteran struggling with PTSD who needed a fresh start. Each person had a story, and each story mattered. James threw himself into the work. He taught classes on customer service, showing students that hospitality was about more than just taking orders. It was about making people feel valued. He brought in guest speakers from successful restaurants. He arranged job-shadowing opportunities at Community Table and other partner establishments. But the most important part wasn't the technical training. It was helping people believe in themselves again. James recognized the look in his students' eyes because he'd seen it in his own mirror. That mixture of hope and fear, wanting to trust that things could get better, but scared to believe it. One afternoon, Miguel stayed after class looking troubled. "Can I ask you something?" Miguel said quietly. "Of course. Do you really think someone like me can make it? I mean, I've got a record. Every time I apply somewhere, they see that and I'm done. Why would this be any different?" James sat down across from him. "You're right that some places will see your record and reject you. That's reality. But here's what else is reality. There are employers like Robert who care more about who you are now than who you were then. And this program is going to connect you with those employers. But what if I mess up again? Then you'll learn from it and keep going," James said. "Miguel, I got fired for doing something good. You made mistakes when you were young. Neither of those things gets to define the rest of our lives unless we let them. You're here because you want to change. That's what matters." Miguel nodded slowly, and James saw something shift in his expression. A little less fear, a little more determination. The first class graduated 3 months later. All 12 students completed the program. 10 of them had job offers before graduation day. Angela got hired at a hotel restaurant and was already being considered for a supervisor position. Miguel landed a job at a catering company whose owner believed in second chances. Diane found her place at a quiet cafe that understood her needs and accommodated them. The local news covered the graduation, and the story started spreading. More restaurants reached out wanting to partner with the program. More funding came through. Robert and James were able to expand, planning for a second class of 20 students. But the biggest surprise came on a random Tuesday afternoon 6 months after the first graduation. James was at community table going over schedules when his phone rang. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. "Is this James Wilson?" "Yes, this is James. My name is Vincent Crawford. I'm the new owner of the Golden Plate restaurant. I was hoping we could talk." James felt his stomach tighten. The Golden Plate, the place that had fired him and blacklisted him. What could they possibly want? "I'm listening," James said carefully. "I purchased the restaurant 6 months ago, and I've been reviewing everything, including past employment records. I came across your file and the circumstances of your termination. Then I did some research and learned about what you've been doing since then. The Second Chances program is remarkable." "Thank you," James said, still not sure where this was going. "I want to apologize on behalf of the restaurant for what happened to you. What Mr. Peterson did was wrong. The way you were treated was wrong, and I'd like to make it right." James didn't respond immediately. He'd imagined this conversation in his head dozens of times, usually late at night when he couldn't sleep. But now that it was happening, he didn't feel the anger he'd expected. He mostly felt tired of carrying it around. "I appreciate that," James finally said, "but I'm not looking to come back, if that's what you're asking." No, that's not it," Vincent said quickly, "though the offer would be there if you wanted it. What I'm proposing is a partnership. I want the Golden Plate to become a partner restaurant with Second Chances. We'll provide job opportunities for your graduates, donate our surplus food to community programs, and frankly, learn from what you're building." James was stunned. The place that had fired him for feeding the hungry now wanted to feed the hungry themselves. It was almost poetic. "There's one more thing," Vincent continued. "Mr. Peterson and his assistant Derek are no longer with the company. I let them go when I took over. The culture they created wasn't what I wanted to be part of." After the call, James sat quietly for a long moment. Then he called Leonard, because Leonard was the one person who would truly understand what this meant. "They want to partner with us," James said. "The Golden Plate wants to be part of Second Chances." Leonard laughed, that deep, joyful laugh. "You know what this is? This is the universe completing the circle. You gave me bread in an alley behind that restaurant, got fired for it, and now that same restaurant is going to help feed and train people who need chances. If that's not justice, I don't know what is." James agreed to the partnership. Within months, the Golden Plate had transformed under new ownership. They hired 3 Second Chances graduates. They started a program donating meals to shelters. They even put up a plaque in their lobby about their commitment to community service. 1 year later, Second Chances had graduated 60 students with an 85% job placement rate. James had been promoted to program director, working with Robert to expand to other cities. Leonard had become the full-time community outreach coordinator, using his connections and experience to build bridges between the program and social services. Keisha finished nursing school and got her dream job at a children's hospital. She loved to tell people that her brother had helped make it possible, but James always corrected her. They'd helped each other. On the 2-year anniversary of Second Chances, James was invited to speak at a community leadership event. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, he felt overwhelmed by how far he'd come. "I used to think that getting fired was the worst thing that ever happened to me," he told the audience, "but I was wrong. It was the best thing, because it put me on the path to finding my real purpose. When one door closes, sometimes it's because you were meant to build a better door for yourself and for others." He talked about Leonard, about Robert, about every student who'd trusted the program to help them rebuild their lives. He talked about the power of kindness and how one act of compassion can create ripples that spread far beyond what you can imagine. After the speech, a young woman approached him. She looked nervous, clutching a folded piece of paper. "Mr. Wilson, I'm homeless right now. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's so hard. Someone told me about your program. Do you think Do you think there might be a spot for me in the next class? James smiled and took the application from her hands. He saw himself in her eyes, the fear, the hope, the desperate wish that someone would see her potential instead of her circumstances. "What's your name?" he asked. "Christina." "Christina, let me tell you something. This program exists because someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. And that chance changed everything. So yes, there's absolutely a spot for you. Let's get you started." As Christina walked away with the information she needed, James felt that familiar warmth in his chest. This was what it was all about: breaking cycles, opening doors, giving people the dignity of a fair chance. He thought back to that cold November night, wrapping food for a starving man named Leonard. If someone had told him then that this one act would lead to all of this, he never would have believed it. But here he was, living proof that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it. Because sometimes losing everything is just making room for something better, something bigger, something that matters more than you ever knew was possible. And James's story, Leonard's story, and the stories of every person who walked through the doors of second chances proved that second chances aren't just possible. When good people refuse to give up on each other, they're inevitable.